All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, can we get a note taker for the meeting?
I'm happy to take some notes. I don't know if there's a particular way you do it or not.
Just in the same doc, at the very bottom, there's a notes section. At the very bottom of the agenda for the day. Yeah, so just whatever gets talked about that isn't already clear from the context of the agenda, maybe. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, and then any other new phases? I haven't been able to attend this meeting for a week or so, so I'm not entirely sure whether or not the folks here are all new faces or not. So if you're new to this meeting, why don't you call yourself out and give us a little introduction?
Hi, I'm Kostas. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. I'm to Buildpacks actually, and I'm working with Michael on this one, specifically to support the Node.js aspect. Thanks.
I guess I might as well go next. I'm Michael Dawson from Red Hat. Been working with Ozzy on the Node aspect of doing some proof of concepts with the Paketo Buildpacks and some of the extensions he's been working on. And here along with Kostas just to hear a little bit more about what's going on and maybe have some questions as well.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Yeah, we've seen Ozzy for a while. It's cool to see some more Red Hat folks. All right, let's see. Moving on with the next bits of the agenda. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So let's see. We've got outstanding RFCs. I have these open over here. We'll skip over this really old draft that I need to figure out what to do with. And we'll jump into the first RFC here, which is propose additional JVMs in the Java build pack.
Yeah, that one's still under discussion, and we're still trying to get by the technical challenge that we have with the layer limit. So this one's on hold or blocked for the moment until we have a solution to the layer limit.
Okay. I see we've got a block tag on there already. All right. Okay, cool. Then moving on, require a specific Java version in the build plan. Excuse my ignorance here. I haven't been following much of the Java stuff recently. Does anyone maybe know what the status of this is?
I think last week there was just more requests for comments and opinions from Java users. I think that was it. They just want to have more conversation and iron out some of the details.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like there's some ongoing discussion. All right, and then we've got this adds new Java RFC for composite draft branches. I believe that this was also the same situation as the previous RFC. Okay, so just waiting for more feedback. It's going to be an all Java all day meeting today. Let's see, selecting the next default Java version.
Yeah, I don't think we discussed this one before.
Is this in that new one? All right, this is just putting more process around how we decide what the default version for Java, what the next default version for Java should be. And I assume when that change should take place. All right, well, if you're a Java maintainer or developer or user, I'm sure your feedback would be useful on this particular RFC. Feel free to check it out. And then finally, we've got a proposal to create a Java specific builder.
Yeah, this one I opened this morning. This is one option to get by the layer limit that we need to resolve before we can add additional JVMs providers to the Java Buildpack. So this is basically just to create a new set of builders that will only include the build packs needed for the composite Java Buildpack, and not include any of the other families. And that'll drop the number of layers from 103 to I think 44 is what I counted. And then we can also add the APM build packs and whatever else, and have them all built in into the composite build pack. So there hasn't been there's no discussion in this PR yet, but there's been some discussion on the side with Daniel and others.
This makes sense. I mean, a language specific one makes a lot of sense. We've talked about this on and off at different points. I know that for me, I tend to just use like a build packless builder and a build pack and stitch them together and just bite the bullet on the performance impact that has. There probably are a bunch of users out there who do something similar. So combining that pattern into something that's like formally supported by the project would probably be a good idea. I know that there were some concerns on the builder maintainer team about this particular thing, but maybe that could be mitigated if we, I don't know if this outlines like something like who actually owns these builders. This is the Java team that owns the builders.
It doesn't really address that other than just to suggest the current builder team support it, but
I just know that the concern when this has been discussed in the past has been like, if Java, then why not all the other build packs? And then you end up with this kind of like very large explosion in the number of builders. Every time a new stack thing comes out, you're like talking about, many builders that need to then get shipped out the door. And that just runs the risk of like, if automation is broken or that kind of thing. Also just like it putting a slight amount of pressure on our relatively fragile GitHub Actions CI system. So yeah, just talking that through would be great. I'm sure the builder folks will chime in and give their thoughts. Great. Anything else to say on this?
I don't have anything else to say.
All right, well, everyone else, feel free to check this out. That covers outstanding RFCs for the day. And then jumping down, we've got CNB updates and questions. I don't know of anything that I've seen in the CNB project that merits an update. Is anyone else following anything closely that they thought that the Paketo project should know about?
Well, it depends. I don't remember whether I told you guys before Christmas, but the extension support went public. So there's a public life cycle and a public pack binary now that support extensions as part of the Buildpack specifications. Yeah,
we have an ongoing conversation in an open PR against Packet to add stack extension support to the library. It should help for folks using Packet to develop stack extensions. I don't know if libcnb has added anything like that, or if everyone's just doing custom stuff or just bash stuff. I don't know.
I mean, the ones we've been testing with have been based around bash for the stuff that we've done. But I think, see, Michael, have you done some stuff with any Go extensions yet?
Yeah, Costas took the bash script that we'd worked together, converted it to Go, And we've been working on that just the last few days to try and reuse some of the bits and pieces from the existing build pack. So like, figuring out which version of Node to use. So we're sort of at that transition point of like, we did the proof of concept. Now we're starting to build something, move it over to Go, because I think that's what we need to do to reuse most of, use as much as possible from Packet and from the build packs as possible.
That makes sense. It's worth opening up a conversation about the use of anything from like, say, the Node Engine build pack, if it's like, because I know that those maintainers have not necessarily thought about what you can grab as like a public package API in there as like a supported public API, right? And so I don't know, they think about it as like, oh, I should make sure to like provide a backwards compatible API. It's mostly considered like an internal implementation. But like that, all that being said, like, I'm not sure that that opinion or that perspective isn't negotiable, right? So like, if you did come to them and say like, hey, we're relying on this, or you want to create some compatibility between these two things by reusing code, I'm sure that that's something that the team would be open to. It's just, we'd have to be aware of that, the fact that other folks are relying on that specifically.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions I had in mind, is like how open is the team to that? And like, there's some very specific things that we've come across that we would want to, that we would need to sort of be, like you said, public API that we could reuse to minimize code that we can reuse. We through the experiments so far, what we want to try and get to, the ideal case would be we just reuse those build packs and we just provide Node and that's it, right? Because of the way the extensions fit in, I think today it looks like we're going to have to like figure out whether it's Node or not in the extension versus in the build packs, because we don't get the, we can't participate in that sort of detect phase. So those are the ones that come to mind first, is like, we'd like to be able to call or reuse the code in, and it's spread across a number of the sub build packs. So like the Node Engine does some checks for .mvmrcs and stuff like that. NPM looks for package JSON. We figured out, like in our Go generate, that we can actually reuse the information that's put into the build plan to say what version. But I think we're going to have to have another copy of the stuff that says, hey, like, is there a package JSON? Is there an .mvmrc? And it would be nice to be able to call that from those build packs rather than duplicating that part.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, feel free to open issues with just some like concrete examples of the stuff you're talking about. Probably start to get a discussion sooner rather than later.
Okay, so that's the best way, is to like open issues in the repos for the build packs and say, hey, would you mind refactoring this into something like this? Is that a good way to?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks.
All right, any other CNB conversation?
If it's related to that kind of discussion, the other one that I had specific, and tell me if it's better for the later on ones, but like the other question I had in mind was, one of the other things we needed to do to reuse the build packs was to say that, like, in addition to the UBI stacks, that the Red Hat stack was also supported. And, all I did in our proof of concept is I added it in the sub build pack to say, hey, I support another stack. But my question is, what would it take for the build packs to say, yes, you can add that as a supported stack? Like, what kind of testing? Or, it's easy to add the tag, but I know there's going to be a lot more, or expect that there's more that should be involved. And so understanding what that more is the other question that I had.
I mean, truthfully, at the end of the day, what seems to be happening across quite a lot of the build packs is like, we have this really rigid compatibility contract, which is just like that stack ID identifier. And like every time someone comes along with a new stack, we have to like add it. And yeah, the question is like, do we mark that as like, Paketo supports this thing explicitly? And if we did, what would we have to do to feel comfortable doing that? And mostly for us, it's like we'd want to have some integration tests that test the fact that that thing actually works in a way that a user would use the build pack. And for those things, we just have tests currently for the Bionic and Jammy Ubuntu stacks that we officially support. And what's been happening when other folks have stacks they want to bring in, for the most part, is we've just been green lighting a wildcard stack. And the project's kind of perspective on that is like, yes, this means now you can use other stacks, and like your functionality with this other stack may not work 100%, right? Like the project isn't making like a really strong guarantee. That isn't to say that like if you show up with a bug, we're not going to fix it. But it's just that it's like we don't guarantee that this works with every stack, because that's just kind of impossible for us to do. Now, in the long run, I think the thing that's going to save us from this really brittle stack ID compatibility contract is the CMB project. And I think this is like coming up very soon on their list of priorities. They're working on this thing that's going to basically remove stack IDs entirely from the definition of how build packs interact with stacks. And so we'll be able to say as a build pack, like we just work on like flavors of Linux on x86 64 or ARM 64 or whatever, right? We just kind of just say there's this like very generalized level of compatibility, and you can lock that down a lot more. You can say like specifically Ubuntu distributions, specifically these versions of Ubuntu distributions. But for us on Paketo, we'll probably be pretty permissive and just say something like, you know, Linux x86 64, and then probably ARM 64 very shortly after. But like we'll try to be as permissive as possible, which means that, you know, folks like yourself who are bringing a different stack should be able to just use the build packs as is. But yeah, that kind of describes the state of the world as it exists today. I don't know if that really answers your question though.
I think it does, but I'll ask a specific question. So like if I submitted a PR to add a wildcard to the Yarn and Node Engine build packs, is that something that would be accepted?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, because that would then let us, you know, let us, you know, continue our development work with more and more of it being in the public, the repo. So it's great.
Yeah, it would be accepted with like kind of that caveat of like, we're not making the statement that this now means the build pack absolutely works on every stack. We're just saying you can use it on a stack, and like if you find issues like file bugs, we'll fix them. But like we're not able to make that like ahead of time guarantee, versus like for the 2 stacks we do support, it's like those are tested ahead of time, and you know, we fully back them.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I think that brings into the next point, which is we're really not under CNB updates and questions so much as Paketo ecosystem updates and questions at this stage, but it's you've got your 2 supported stacks of the Ubuntu flavors at the moment. And last year on the roadmap, there was an item to do UBI 8 stacks. We've been working on that and working towards that. Now, I'm assuming that carries over to this year's roadmap. I missed all that stuff because, you know, I was start of the year, I was still on vacation. But it would be kind of my expectation that if we do manage to get UBI 8 stacks as a supported thing by Paketo, that then it would become a third option to those 2. So for as long as stacks exist, then if we were going that way, we would hypothetically have UBI 8 as a third option as a supported stack against those build packs. I think I'd make the suggestion that it's probably not worth going to the effort of adding that in this case, and adding the wildcard makes more sense, because we know that CMB is going to be removing the concepts of stacks long term anyway. But it does bring around the larger discussion that again, it's not really CMB related, it's more Paketo related, which is look, we've got is that we want to write an RFC up for the UBI 8 stack stuff, and we're kind of wondering about how do we get the information for what we need to put in that RFC regarding how do we make this a supported stack, you know. Do we have to have a test suite that runs against the build packs that we include for builder images for that stack? How do we get that stack built? You know, how do we get builder images for that stack built? How do we decide which build packs go into it? Is this an opt-in? Do we just run things and test it manually? Do we port the existing test cases, and if they work, everything's good? Or there's a lot of questions in there that we're a little bit wary about as to how do we get this started? Because we could write an RFC, but I think we need to kind of know roughly what we should be suggesting, because this the introduction of a whole new thing that will run parallel to the existing Ubuntu stacks. But there's some questions in there, and I'd like to get some discussions going around that. And I don't think there's really enough people here to do that. But the question is, where and how should we initiate that kind of activity?
Yeah, I think that the place for this is probably like the Paketo Buildpacks discussion forum. I would start like a discussion there just to kind of like sketch out what we think of as the set of requirements for like what an RFC would outline. But I think like the best example of this is probably like if you just looked at the existing Jammy RFC, which is like the most recent example of like we're gonna add a new stack. And I'm trying to jog my memory on this, but like I think that there's like, a handful of things that are outlined, like you have to specify the actual stack identifier for it. And I think the way practically that we went about going to support it was we kind of just went build pack by build pack. And how you choose, which build packs are going to be your kind of, initial targets for support is probably up to you. What are the ones that, are the highest use for end users, that kind of thing? What's the easiest to get to a working state? But basically at the end of the day, like I think the expectation would be you have stacks for whatever like the reasonable use cases are that you care about. So for like on the Ubuntu side, it meant like a full base and tiny stack. I have no idea if that concept of there being these kind of like levels of stack makes any sense for UBI. So like some sort of expectation of that. And then build packs that support it. So like the build packs have to have whatever it is that they're providing as their functionality modified in such a way that they are capable of supporting the new stack. And then finally, I think there would be an expectation that there are builders that the stack has. And for those builders, we really would only just have, at least initially, those build packs that do actually support the stack, right? And you would add more build packs onto that builder over time as you kind of rolled out support across the set of build packs. That's how we did Jammy. I think it's makes the most sense for how we would do UBI support as well. But yeah, I would start a discussion. You can kind of like work out the details there. And then from there, I think the next step is definitely an RFC.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Would that include things like, for our extensions, like adding a repo in the Paketo for that code as well?
Absolutely. So if there's like any sort of other new things that are needed, you need stack extensions repositories, you have new build packs or whatever that need to get added. I would expect if you knew ahead of time, the RFC would include those things, but also like an RFC is kind of like a proposal of an idea. So like it's expected that you're not going to know everything ahead of time. And so like, if things come up along the way, we can do new RFCs, we can do an addendum to the existing RFC. So the workflow is kind of flexible there. But like, if you're thinking already ahead of time, I know I'm going to need this, then like, I would expect to see it in the RFC.
Sounds good.
It might be interesting to Kevin for the JVM stuff in the long run, just as an aside, because if the JVM's installed via an extension, it won't be on a layer at all. It'll be part of the base image.
Right, I agree.
All right. I think we're deep into the open mic question discussion topic section. So I'll just ask again if there are other questions or topics folks wanted to bring up. Doesn't sound like it. All right, then I think we've reached the end of the meeting here. Thank you all, folks. This is a great discussion. I think we'll see you all next week.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See ya.